Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to our random review. We're back in Japan, 1965. Tomi Uchida is a fugitive from the past. Uchida isn't a director that is that well exposed in the West, even though Arrow Video did release The Mad Fox and Arrow Academy, which is a wonderful, stunning colour film, and Bloody Spear at Mount Fuji. But A Fugitive from the Past is pretty special. In 1999 it was voted as the third greatest Japanese film of all time by Japanese critics. Number one was Seven Samurai. Mizoguchi and Ozu were in the top 5 as well. It's 183 minutes, but don't worry, it doesn't feel like 183 minutes. There's nothing worse than a 3-hour film that feels like 3 hours, or 4 hours, or 10 hours. It's based on a book which was 1700 pages long, so I suppose a 3-hour film isn't too bad for a 1700 page novel. It spans 10 years, 1947 to 1957. Obviously 47 is post-war, still under occupation, until 1953 possibly. That could be wrong. So there's a typhoon in Hokkaido, and 2 prisoners who've recently been released from Ashibari prison. Obviously Eureka has just released Ashibari Prison 1 to 3, which are hugely enjoyable films. And they meet up with another character played by Rintaro Mukini, and they are hoping to escape in the bedlam of the storm, because perhaps all 3 of them, or perhaps not all 3 of them, have been involved in stealing money, killing a family and setting them on fire, which led to a fire throughout that location, and they're hoping to escape in the chaos caused by this typhoon. The detective in charge of the case, played by comedian Ban Chunzaburo, who is very methodical, very much in the Takeshi Shimura and Stray Dog kind of methodical. He follows the tracks, which leads them to the other side of this strait, and it looks as though the boat was burned, and then out of all the bodies from a ship that has wrecked because of the typhoon, there's 2 extra bodies that seem to have been beaten in the head, and they figure out that this might be the 2 out of the 3 that were responsible for the murder, arson and theft. But where is the last character? We follow Mikuni cross country. He meets this down the luck prostitute. I'm sure most prostitutes are down the luck. And she's just desperate for company and connection, and he gives her some of the money, and unbeknownst to him, a piece of his body, that she is smitten by this guy after he disappears, and kind of is eternally grateful for him giving her a substantial amount of money to help her stop entertaining men in a house of ill repute. She's always wanted to go to Tokyo, so she ends up going to Tokyo, and he kind of disappears, and the trail for the detective goes cold. And then 10 years later, she thinks she recognises this guy in the paper, but he has a different name, and then she decides to go and find him, and he denies ever having met her, and that kind of kicks the story on. More crimes happen, and then Takakura Ken, who was obviously pretty young in 1965, his detective is part of the unit that picks up on this part of the case, but then they go back to the original detective who's retired and bring him to try and figure out what's going on. You can really feel the older detective, and we get kind of hints with his family that he was obsessed with this case and it has kind of damaged him, in the weight of the responsibility of never actually finding who butchered this family and set them on fire and then left. The toll that takes on him. There is I would say, somewhat of an influence of Kurosawa's High and Low. It is more than anything a kind of procedural, but again, despite its length, it remains riveting. It doesn't really have lulls, even though it is go talk to this person, talk to that person. It's still Uchida does a really good job of keeping it fresh and keeping the pacing up. He does throw in some interesting camera techniques, again, to keep it fresh. So when the original detective Yumisaka is kind of imagining what these guys were doing and how they escaped, we kind of see it not necessarily in a negative film way. It's solarized, so it's him imagining what they were actually doing. There's use of stills, the use of music is interesting as well, from traditional to not so traditional. Mikumi gives a tremendous performance. As somebody who, again, is trying to forget the past and move on. He's become, if it is the same character, he's become a bit of an entrepreneur, and the community love him, and but of course he might have a dark past. It's black and white, it's widescreen, it's shot really beautifully, and you can kind of see why Japanese critics thought so highly of it, certainly in 1999. It's an example of doing a 3-hour film well. I think we've all seen 3-hour films that drag, and you can say, well, you could easily lose 45 minutes off of that. But this is not the case. This is just a wonderful film, certainly important in Japan for its historical reference. Obviously get a booklet, as expected, with Arrow. This is a perfect example of a title that would have been Arrow Academy, but is now just Arrow. It's just a wonderful film. Again, I can't really do it justice in a 10-minute review, as it's 183 minutes. But again, I'm not going to go into every little nook and cranny of the story. Anybody who's read the 1700-page book can let me know. But this is the 130, lightweight, 183-minute cut, which is a 1080 presentation of the restored film. There's a wonderful introduction by Jasper Sharp, who does lots of extras on Asian cinema, but he really goes into the historical perspective and goes into Uchida's career, which is really interesting. There's no less than 6 special pieces by Japanese film scholars, so you can tell the kind of significance of the film. So you have Aaron Guerrero, and they're all professors, and Irene Gonzalez Lopez, Eric Hominick, Gerald Jackson, Daisuke Mayu, and Alexander Zoltan. So there's 6 pieces by professors on the film, a trailer, an image gallery, and there's reversible sleeve of this nice black one, and the original poster artwork, which is rather nice as well. Yeah, it's good to see Arrow still doing Japanese stuff, and this one is really, really good, strangely enough. And again, Uchida, there's not that many of his films kind of available in decent versions. Again, usually when I find a director, I immediately go onto eBay and try and find copies of his other films. Obviously sometimes they end up being really expensive and stuff like that, but there's not actually that many Uchida that you can find at the moment. So we have these 3 from Arrow and Arrow Academy, which I would highly recommend, but I would certainly say Fugitive from the Past is easily the best out of the 3, but Mad Fox and Bloody Spear at Mount Fuji are rather good as well. So thanks very much for watching this random review. I will say on the channel I did make a decision and sorted my backlog into Japanese films and everything else. So I'm going to try and focus on getting my Japanese films down, which means I'm hopefully going to finally get around to some more Ozu, as I've only seen 2. But certainly there's a whole bunch of Japanese, so I've almost got a little bookcase full of just my Japanese backlog, then obviously a bigger bookcase full of all the rest of my backlog, but I'm going to try and focus on Japan. I will be watching other films obviously, but I'm going to try and reduce my Japanese backlog, because I love Japanese cinema. It's probably my favourite country for cinema, so I really should reduce my Japan backlog as much as possible. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So apologies if you don't like Japanese cinema, but if you don't like Japanese cinema, I'm not sure why you're watching this channel anyway, because Japanese cinema rocks, despite their history and their attitude to women sometimes. But there you go. So thanks very much for watching. Again, please let me know if you've seen Fugitive from the Past and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews, some of which may be Japanese. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.